This one's for Bobby and all those like him with broken places in their lives. Bobby's been gone. He's been gone for a long time. Actually, I don't even know when my stepbrother passed. I just know his life was one of horror. And I don't tell his story to glorify any of the evil that was perpetrated against him, but I share it to honor him because it's not fair what he went through. And really, I'm not a person who likes to even hear, that's not fair, because what is fair? Like, we don't even want fair in our lives, y'all. We really don't. But Bobby, such a cute young boy. And he was just mistreated from the start. He suffered a lot of physical abuse and emotional abuse and bullying. But I remember one day when my stepdad had a hold of him in the yard. I was sick. I think I woke up with the measles that morning, and I heard this horrible sound from upstairs in my bedroom. So I looked out the window to see what it was, and it was my stepdad who had Bobby by the arm and was swinging him in circles, beating him with a belt. And Bobby was wailing and wailing like a dog was being hurt. It was horrible what he was going through. Just being struck like he meant nothing. And I was so distraught. But I could do nothing. Because we already knew the atmosphere in our home. That's what it was. That's what it was like where I grew up. There was no rescue. There was no help. Just kids in fear and a mom in fear. And a boy who was 12, probably 12 at that time, being hurt like he meant nothing to anybody. Then some horrible things happened, even differently horrible. I can't say more horrible, but differently horrible things, and our life was changed. And there was a divorce in the family, and Bobby and his dad moved out for a short time. I went to another woman's home and left my other two brothers and my baby sister and me with my mom. And then there was a lot of back and forth. Like the stepdad, he would come and go. He wouldn't leave my mom alone. There was just a lot of domestic violence, and he just wouldn't leave us be or leave my mom alone, and she couldn't escape. But one day, a couple years later, we got this call, or mom told us after school that there'd been a house fire where Bobby lived, and he was burned and over 90% of his body and might die, and that his stepbrother had died. And the other one was hurt, but not critically. But they lost their house in the fire and lost one of the boys, like I said. But Bobby, his life went from bad to even worse. So Mom and my aunt took us up to, where was it? Maybe Evanston. There's a burn hospital up around Chicago or the Indiana side, somewhere up there, and we went to see him, and it was horrifying. We had no way to prepare for what we would see of this little boy who so desperately needed love. And I know my mom felt guilt. I'm sure she thought it was her fault, that he should have stayed with us because he would have been better off, but she had her hands full with 4 of us. But Bobby was wrapped in gauze from head to toe and in traction, and just, it was horrible. All I can remember is the shock and horror, and couldn't imagine what he must have been feeling. And on the way home, the trauma was just more than I can iterate. And for years, all we knew was he was trying to heal, and he was in many surgeries and skin grafts, and just imagine the pain that 12 or 13-year-old, I don't know if he might have been 13 at that time, what he must have gone through. Death's not always the worst thing, y'all. And I especially believe he would have been protected by God and if he had passed then. But I know God protected him anyway through all the years, the remaining years he had. So I don't even know without digging in to family history, and there's just not really anyone much left around who could tell me anything. But a few years later, when we saw him, he was much older, and he'd lived in a few homes, I think, and he ran off to join maybe a convent here or there. I don't even know his whole story. You know, communications back in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, they weren't like they are today. So all I know is I saw him once when I was about 17, and was just fearful looking at him and trying to imagine what he must have been going through. And none of us knew how to approach him or deal with it. Like in our home, it was survival. It wasn't we all stuck together and tried to help one another. It was all, we were all trying our best to survive. It was definitely a survivor's mentality. So we didn't even know how to try to help him. And there was certainly no love of God in our home. I'm not saying there was hate, except for from one person, our stepdad, who was back in our lives. But Bobby came and then he went, I don't know, after a day or two. And then I heard that at one point in Kansas, he poured gasoline on himself in a gas station and tried to light himself on fire because of his torment. He just wanted to die. Like imagine the fire he went through before the actual house explosion, and then what he lived through with all the stares and the horrible comments that I'm sure he received, and the rejection by people who don't understand. Like they didn't understand him before he was disfigured, so certainly strangers wouldn't understand him afterwards. But just imagine hurting so badly that you just want to catch yourself on fire and die. I don't know when or how he died. We found out years later that he did finally pass. And all I could say was, I know that mentally he wasn't right because of all he'd suffered. First at his own blood dad's hands. Bio dad, I guess you'd call him. Because that's all he was a bio dad, a monster to Bobby. And then the actual fire he went through, and then the suffering afterwards, which was great and was for many years. But I know the love of God rescued him at his death and took him into the presence of God. So I know Bobby's okay now. But boy, did he have a long, hard haul to get there. But I know he's like my other brothers who are rejoicing that they are with God, that there is no more pain, no more sadness, no more sorrow for them, that they're where they belong, that they made it home, that like Mark, who made it home almost 3 years ago now. In just a few days, it'll be 3 years for Mark. But Bobby made it home too. So Bobby's heart, yeah, that's golden. Mark's is blue because that was his color. John, I've used white and blue. Sorry, white and gold. Matt, I think Matt would have been green. Ah, oh, Lord. 4 brothers. Already passed. All of them too young, actually. But it's golden because they're with God. But when you think your life is hard and your battles are great, maybe remembering Bobby's story will help you to know that, not to lessen your own pain and suffering, because as I've said before, it's not about whose pain or whose trauma is greater, because trauma is trauma, abuse is abuse, misuse is misuse. But to encourage you that even in the darkest of dark, there is a light, and his name is Jesus. And there's no other answer. It's just Jesus. It's Jesus and Jesus alone. He is the light, and he will shatter the darkness in your life, and he'll make it all worthwhile in the end. When we get to stand on his side with him, we'll all rejoice and know it was worth it. That these trials and these pains and these sufferings we go through, they'll be gone. They're not forever, as long as we choose Jesus. He's the light of the world. Jesus.